Thank you. Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's Cabinet meeting. I am aware that it is slightly cold in the chamber as all the windows are open, but there is a genuine reason for it because we are trying to mitigate COVID. So please bear with us. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome Councillor Markham to her first Cabinet meeting as portfolio holder for public services. So welcome on board, and hopefully you'll find it interesting and enlightening. So first things first, we have the meeting protocol. I believe everyone here is aware of that, so I'm not going to read it word for word, but the long and the short of it is, if there is a fire, please go through the exits and meet outside the Virgin Money Bank. And if you have mobile phones on you, please can you make sure they are set to silent or turned off, please. Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is apologies. I think all of Cabinet are here, so there's no apologies. Any declarations of interest that are not already printed on the agenda? I think there's only yours, Councillor Markham, about being a member of Warwickshire County Council, because this was printed before the change in Cabinet position. So can we just note that, unless you have anything additional to Warwickshire County Council?
No, I haven't. Everything that I've got is actually recorded here anyway.
If we can just make a note of that, please, Kelly. Thank you. So that moves us on to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Is everyone happy that I sign them as a true and accurate record of the last meeting? Thank you. That moves us on to agenda item number 5, which is public consultation. I have been informed that we have speakers on agenda items number 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. As I don't think the first 2 items will be too long, I propose to take the agenda in the order it is printed. So that moves us on to agenda item number 6, which is the housing revenue account, void garden clearances and grounds maintenance ad hoc works. Councillor Golby.
Thanks, Chair. Just presenting this pretty much as written. It's fairly self-explanatory. It's to formalise a currently informal arrangement. We were left with a gap when our previous contractor decided they couldn't fulfil the contract that they had contracted for. So we had to take on ad hoc works as they came to us. This is actually formalising this now, so we are recontracting to make the ad hoc works formal with NABCEL through a tackle arrangement.
Thank you, Councillor Golby, and I will second that from the Chair. Is that there's no public speakers on this? Is there any non-Cabinet member who wishes to speak on this item? Councillor Condacore.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to clarify. It said it's going to NABCEL, but obviously NABCEL doesn't have any staff doing it at the moment. So are they then subcontracting it or employing staff? That'd be useful to know. Thank you.
NABCEL are actually subcontracting on our behalf.
Thank you. Any officer wish to come back on the report? No? In which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Thank you very much. That is carried. That then moves us on to agenda item number 7, which is the Public Space Protection Order, misuse of novel psychoactive substances and the alcohol in public spaces. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet's been asked to consider approval of a public space protection order to address the issues caused by the misuse of novel psychoactive substances in public spaces within the borough. This is in accordance with Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act of 2014. PSPOs are a useful tool to help tackle issues around antisocial behaviour, and this proposed order is based on the feedback of a public consultation exercise that took place with residents, businesses and partner organisations earlier this year. I'm sure most members of the Cabinet will have had many resident complaints about antisocial behaviour and the increasing trend of using NPS that, amongst other issues, results in the dumping of hundreds of those silver nitrous oxide canisters in they blight our public areas, open spaces, car parks. This PSPO will give the Council an enforceable tool to help us address the issue. The PSPO will be added to a previous order in relation to the misuse of alcohol in public spaces that was already in place, and the proposal is to also renew this existing order. I therefore propose the recommendation that the borough-wide orders be approved as set out in the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. Does that receive a seconder?
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham. I have no public speakers on this item. Any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Watkins and Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I'll be in full support of this. It's always good to get some extra support and to see that things that are done to tackle this and now with the police. So yeah, I'll be in full support of this and look forward to seeing it implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Watkins, really support this. We're on the working party, which I think was back in February time. One question I've got about how long it is before these things start, because it says the 1st of February, I think, on the documents, and we haven't yet started the one for the road car trading on verges. So with all the things going on in the world at the moment, I wasn't sure why we had to wait 2 months virtually for it to start. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacourt. My understanding was that the car roadside was in, oh, not yet. Is there anything we wish to come back on that one?
No, I can explain the procedure, but it is what it is.
Okay. Thank you. Basically, it's a legal procedure we have to go through, Councillor Condacourt, but it is something that I think all members across the chamber would want to see implemented, as it is another tool in the arsenal against these antisocial behaviour hotspots, which we see increasingly popping up across the borough in various different parts, particularly in our play and open spaces. I know that is a particular problem that we have and isn't very attractive, especially to parents with young children as well. It's a very difficult subject to broach, I would suspect, about how you explain what are these little canisters on the ground. So, any Cabinet member wish to speak on this item? No? Okay, in which case we'll move on to the vote, which is, are all members in favour of the recommendations? Please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you. That moves us on to agenda item number 8, which is the independent living schemes. Councillor Golby.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to present this. This is one of our commitments that we've made previously, that we would do this. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find the report because I've not got a paper copy. So it's... Oh, it's fine. Thank you. So it's to do with the commitments that we made to give independent living schemes a pot of money they could bid into for local improvements that they know that they would like to make their lives a little bit easier. We have set aside, as is in the paper, it's £5,000 for each independent living complex, and it is going to be a rolling scheme because some of the schemes are actually being revamped. So we need to make sure we're not doubling up on things as they go. So as the schemes roll through the programme of updates. After that point, we will then pick up the £5,000 pot. So although not all schemes are listed on this immediately, it is intended that it will be rolled out to all of them eventually over the course of the period of time that we're doing the transformation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Does that receive a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Croft. I did have Mrs. Condacall down, but I think your name's come off. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, thank you. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacall, then Councillor Beetham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is most welcome, and we have quite a few voids in some of our complexes, so actually spending a bit of money doing the laundry areas and the common areas may give us a return for actually having less voids. So I'm really supportive of this. One thing I would ask, I've not been inside our complexes much in the last 2 years, but I've been out in the garden, is actually the residents quite often do a lot of gardening now, free of charge effectively for the council. And they were moaning about having to pay green bin charge for their £40 garden waste bin and things. So having a small budget for gardening as well, I think would be a useful thing. That they have to raise quite a lot of money in the past through Christmas fairs and various things just for their sort of little nice to haves. So I think it is useful to have a look at a little pot to go alongside this sort of refresh so that people can have a little pot of money, maybe £100 per cent or something, just to do, get a compost bin or pay for the green bin charge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacall. Councillor Beetham.
Brilliant, thank you. I just want to say that this, from residents I've spoken to, I'm glad to see that Kingswood Court is on there and that it does need, or has needed, a good update, so I'm glad to see this money coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beetham. Anything officers wish to come back on? No? Councillor Golby? Anything to come back on?
With regards to the green bins, it's a difficult one because actually they're not necessarily one unit. There are lots of separate units. So there's complications in green bins and what have you. So it's something that we could look at, but I can't promise anything. So that's the best I can offer right now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Golby. I think that's a reasonable undertaking from yourself, Councillor Golby, to go away and ask the question and see exactly what the rules are surrounding that. If there is anything that we can do, we're always happy to look at these things, but we have to make sure that everything is legal and above board and within budget.
Sorry, Chair, yeah, we can't disadvantage one group of residents over another, so we do have to tread very carefully on people who are tenants of ours.
Yeah, point accepted there, Councillor Golby, thank you. Any other Cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. Just very briefly, Councillor Beetham has put me in mind. As Councillor Golby says, it's a rolling programme, and I've spoken to Director Dawson today, and she has confirmed to me that while we've started with some of the Nuneaton schemes, we will be extending the programme to Bedworth in the next tranche in the new year. So I just wanted to flag that, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Croft. I think this is another case of a promise made and a promise kept on behalf of this administration. We said it in opposition, we proposed it in opposition, and it is yet another idea that we have delivered whilst in control. And I think it demonstrates that we are a party that likes to keep our word to the residents wherever we possibly can, and that actually I think this can make, for the amount of money, it could actually make a large difference to the residents within those complexes, because they have, over the past couple of years, in particular in the complexes with COVID, they have been one of the hardest hit communities within Nuneaton and Bedworth, being of the age and generation which has been the most vulnerable. And I think having something like this would actually, perhaps in some cases, make their Christmas, or, as Councillor Croft said, make their New Year instead. So I'm looking forward to this rolling out, and I'm sure Councillor Golby will be chomping at the bit to do so. So can we go to the vote, please, members of Cabinet? All those in favour? Thank you very much. That is carried. So that moves us on to the local development scheme. Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Every council has a statutory duty to maintain and keep up to date a local development scheme. This is the published timetable for progressing development plan documents. The existing local development scheme was adopted in September last year and is now in need of updating. Cabinet is being asked to approve the updated local development scheme as per the details starting at page 50 in your agenda and recommend its adoption to full council. The main update concerns the Borough Plan Review timetable. This timetable was fixed earlier this year. However, following initial issues and options consultation in June, it became clear that going from that issues and options stage straight to a final publication stage, which would have been in January 22, will present significant risks in ensuring that all necessary evidence is in place. So it's proposed that an additional preferred option stage of consultation is added. This will not only allow a greater opportunity for public engagement, but it will also allow the council to make sure that all the necessary evidence is in place to ensure the soundness of and legal compliance of the plan when it's examined by a planning inspector. Included in this evidence will be the Housing and Economic Development Needs Assessment, which will inform the borough's up-to-date housing need. The updated local development scheme also proposes that the strategy for redeveloping the town centres is progressed as a supplementary planning document, as opposed to an area action plan. This SPD would provide the town centre policies and opportunity sites in the same way that the area action plan was going to. However, the additional benefits of progressing this SPD would be a saving of £50,000, which is the cost of an independent examination of an area action plan, which would no longer be required. The SPD could be progressed alongside the Borough Plan Review work and reflect the more up-to-date evidence. Less officer time is required to produce an SPD, and the process for an SPD is quicker than the need for an area action plan. I therefore propose the recommendation as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith, and I will second the recommendation from the Chair. I have one public speaker, which is Mrs. Condical.
Thank you. Well, it's disappointing, really, that the timescale is being extended, and mainly due to budget requirements and things, because the review of the borough plan is probably the most important thing for residents. And, you know, from a personal point of view, I would say that, you know, the amount of money that's being spent on free parking and things would much be better spent on this, which is actually, you know, so important to the whole borough. I think we need a bit more honesty about processes from everyone concerned, from officers, from cabinet, from, you know, councillors, whoever. Because looking at it, I have to ask, was it ever possible to realistically go from the issues and options being in June 2021 to the publication consultation in January 2022? Because if you are actually going to be looking at the responses and taking them on board, making changes as a result, which hopefully that's the whole point of doing consultation, then it seems like it was a nonsensical timescale for that anyway. In terms of the town centre area action plan, stroke SPD or whatever you change it to, again, I mean, the examination cost of 50,000, presumably that's been known all along. So, you know, I'm just surprised that we've got as far as we have doing an area action plan. Did no one stop and say, hold on a moment, do we actually need this? Can it be done differently without incurring this cost and things? As someone who responded to both, you know, consultations, or at least one of them. I think I might have just missed the date by one day or something on the second one. Things, you know, hopefully all these responses and things that were already done for the area action plan aren't going to waste, and we're not back to, you know, square one. So those are really just the two comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Condacor. Are there any points of clarification? Point of clarification to Mrs. Condacor. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'd just like to come back on a couple of points on that. She started off by stating that the borough plan was being extended due to financial pressures. Totally wrong. Absolutely wrong. It's being extended because we need to make sure that we have a proper evidence base so that when we go to inspection, the plan's got a better chance of being found sound. The HEDNA, the Housing and Economic Development Needs Assessment, the outputs of that won't be available till early in the new year. They then need to be adjusted and take into account the national census. That information probably won't now be available till spring sometime, which pushes the whole thing forward. We can't actually complete the borough plan review without knowing what those housing numbers are, before we can complete our duty to cooperate by talking to our partner authorities. The other thing to pick up on was the Town Centre Area Action Plan. That was changed from a Town Centre Area Action Plan to the proposed SPD because we had an advisory meeting with government inspectors and they weren't quite happy that we were working on an up-to-date evidence base. We need to update that evidence base. That's being done as the part of the borough plan review, and so it made sense to align this to the borough plan review and produce an SPD instead of the area action plan. A benefit of that is we're saving some money, but it wasn't the primary reason for doing it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. Any non-cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Money is a factor in not doing it quicker, surely, because the report says how much it would cost to do it quicker. So, of all your tick boxes, quickly reviewing the borough plan, people interpreted it as not starting to review the borough plan, but actually doing the whole process. And waiting till 2024 on the current timescales isn't really quickly, because all the developments on strategic sites will go ahead, and developers are circling, as I well know, on other sites in the borough. So we'll actually not end up with 14,000, but we'll end up with 16,000 or something allocated. And we will have extra sites coming in that do not join up and have any infrastructure plans. So this is an absolute disaster waiting till 2024. If you can't accelerate it by a year, accelerating it by 6 months and moving half the cost forward would clearly help. And actually, if you're spending money quicker but getting it over with doesn't always mean you spend more money over the period of several years. And clearly, we're not getting what we need from developers. So actually accelerating the plan might mean we get this with things like the Wellington Station entrance, might mean we get the GP surgery. Actually having a plan that actually puts some weight behind some of this stuff earlier might actually get us out the horrendous planning problems we have at the moment. And we all sit on, well, you and me sit on the planning committee, and you know the problems we have. So having a plan that has things like the Wellington Station entrance explicitly in the plan and costed will actually help us have that Wellington Station entrance. So I really ask the Cabinet to reconsider if there are opportunities to increase the speed of this. And also, this is definitely a promise not ticked, because the government haven't let you speed things up or postpone some developments until we've got a plan revised. This is an absolute disaster. We know Coventry population is many tens of thousands less than it was when we were discussing the duty to cooperate. The whole system is badly flawed. and we need to change it now. I mean, we can only build 600 to 700 houses a year. That is what the economy will bear. And what we're getting is a disaster because of that, because we're not building our 5-year land supply. And we will just go down a spiral of, you haven't got your supply, you have to build more houses on countryside. You haven't got your supply, you have to... So getting a decent plan with decent targets is absolutely essential. And I do hope you go back to government, whoever is ministers and prime ministers tomorrow, and get this sorted.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Anything officers wish to come back on? No. Well, I have a few points as the seconder, and part of it doesn't actually impinge on my portfolio with regeneration in business. So, with regard to the free car parking, for example, or the car parking offers we have had, or the market offers we have had, I would challenge Mrs. Condacor to go into the town centres and tell the market traders and the businesses that we should withdraw these offers at a crucial time when businesses are actually starting to recover from COVID. And I know that I have had a number of market traders tell me that without these offers, they would have folded and they would not be still trading within our borough. And you only have to look at our car parks, even tonight, behind this building, to see the people coming in. I see it when I come to work every day, when I'm in Nuneaton. And it is having an impact, and the numbers are indicating from the discussions I've had with officers that actually the number of ticket sales has increased, and we are getting closer, not quite there yet, there's more work to be done, but we are edging our way back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of car parking sales, and that is an encouraging sign. There's more work to be done, but it also indicates that the previous Labour administration really didn't know its backside from its elbow in terms of setting pricing structures for the car parking charges. And it isn't enough to say that bringing money forward now will have savings in the long run. That's not how local government finance works. I cannot bring forward expenditure from financial year 23-24 into financial year 21-22 or 22-23. I can't spend money before I actually have it. So that is a massive problem that we have. Yes, we are behind where we should be. The inspector said at the back in 2018-2019 that we need to have a review done by 2023. The Labour administration sat on the review for the last 3 years of its measly existence and did nothing with it. So we are already operating with one hand tied behind our back. Of course there's going to be a delay, Councillor Condacor. It's not our fault, it's the fault of the previous administration. We've actually come in, picked it up, and Councillor Smith, very much to his credit, is running with it and trying to accelerate it wherever he can. But we have to have the evidence. One of the things that united Councillor Condacor in the opposition when we were on those benches was about the lack of evidence that we had with the borough plan. And that means that without the up-to-date evidence, our plan is likely to be held to be flawed if we don't have that. And if we don't have the evidence, then we can't redraw the borough plan, and that is to no one's satisfaction. If we need to get this evidence in, there is a cost, but the primary driver is getting that evidence in on time and on budget. Otherwise, we cannot deliver the review. But I think that actually, considering the starting position we had when we came in, we are doing a decent job of trying to accelerate the borough plan review. When it comes to the town centre area action plan, the advice that I had quite clearly was, in addition to what Councillor Smith said, that if we progressed with a DPD, as it was with the area action plan, it might be held to be in conflict with the works that we are doing as part of transforming Nuneaton, and would actually put at risk any future planning applications we may wish to submit for transforming Nuneaton. And that was not a risk that this administration was prepared to take with the future of our town centres. So going for an SPD gives us more flexibility in terms of progressing transforming Nuneaton, but also having some kind of plan for our town centres that we can work to. So I think for a number of reasons the speakers are not quite in line with the facts. Any other cabinet member wish to speak? No? In which case are we all happy to move to the vote? All those in favour please show. Okay, thank you, that has been Carried. That moves us on to agenda item number 10, which is the approval of the infrastructure funding statement, the infrastructure delivery plan, and the authority monitoring report. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. This report is seeking Cabinet approval of the infrastructure funding statement, the infrastructure delivery plan, and the authority monitoring report. The publication of the infrastructure funding statement is a statutory requirement, and the document sets out the developer contributions relating to Section 106, planning obligations collected and managed in the last financial year. The publication of the authority monitoring report is also a statutory requirement. The main purpose of the document is to provide an update on plan production and report on the extent to which policies in the adopted borough plan are being achieved. Again, the report covers the period from April 20 to March 21, last financial year. The infrastructure delivery plan is a key piece of evidence and sets out the infrastructure required to support the development proposed in the adopted borough plan. The document incorporates updates from infrastructure providers and consultees where they've provided them. Cabinet should note that some further minor amendments are proposed, primarily to clarify arrangements for the securing of Section 106 contributions to go towards delivery of new or improved sports and leisure facilities where required. I should also mention that the new IDP will be required for the emerging borough plan review, but the council still has a duty to update the infrastructure requirements for developments identified in the currently adopted borough plan. I therefore propose the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Does that receive a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Markham. Mrs. Condacor.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on just a couple of things really on here. I mean, there's loads that could be dissected, but a lot of it is sort of too complex to go in with only 3 minutes to speak. I just wanted to sort of ask the question. There's an awful lot of money that's been raised from Section 106, monies that has actually come in between April 2020 and the April 2021. How long does it take for these monies to actually be spent? Because it seems that there's been a lot more come in that timescale than in the previous year, and there's a lot of stuff that desperately needs doing, and some things that I'm really pleased to see are there, but I actually don't want to just see it as a statement on here saying footpath construction. I actually want to see it in reality. So I'd be interested to know sort of what the timescales are on things. On the infrastructure providers bit on the borough plat, well, what's it called, the infrastructure delivery thing, I was a bit sort of bemused by some of the things, infrastructure providers, so we're looking at transport, and the only bus company that's mentioned is Stagecoach. Now, there are a hell of a lot more bus companies, and a lot of them a lot better than Stagecoach actually at providing services at a reasonable cost. So I just wondered, it didn't seem very comprehensive, the list, and as has happened on so many of these things that come forward, the list of providers or whatever they may be called don't always seem to be terribly up to date. For example, with health, the clinical commissioning groups have merged and what have you and things. So there's always a huge lag, I know, but I'm just concerned that it's not being kept up to date enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Condacor. Any points of clarification? No? I did have Mr. Alan Baxter down to speak, but he hasn't attended, so we will... You have a statement instead, okay? Brent Davis will read the statement from Mr. Baxter.
you, Chair. So Mr Baxter is making statements in relation to the infrastructure delivery plan. His first comment relates to page 114 of the papers, which is water and waste treatment, sections 7.3 and the fit for purpose aspects of that. 7 Trent state, in relation to wastewater treatment, no issues have been identified relating to capacity. This is incorrect. There has been a public outcry relating to thousands of hours of untreated sewage discharge into the streams and rivers in the borough from the outdated Victorian waste system where rainwater mixes with raw human waste. The data available on diluted raw sewage discharge needs to be included in this section of the Council's knowledge base and consideration given to future borough planning to eliminate this problem. It is very much a problem. I'm sure the Green Party councillor can happily supply this information to the council. Mr Baxter then goes on to make comment about page 140 of the papers, which relates to mental health services and support for young children. No mention is made in this document of the massive health inequality between North Warwickshire and South Staffordshire, where Nuneaton children are experiencing a 4-year, 208 weeks waiting list for an autism assessment, where 11 miles away in Tamworth they have a 12-week wait and state-of-the-art support facility. In a presentation to the Borough Council a few weeks ago, this was described as disgusting by councillors. It should also be noted that RISE, RSE, are referring people to the Little Peg support group for autistic children to obtain pre-diagnostic support. Remember that 4-year wait. This support group is based at Stockingford Community Centre in Hornswood Road and is currently having cuts imposed on it, potentially putting its continued long-term use in jeopardy, therefore impacting groups such as Little Pegs. Rather than closing the health and well-being inequalities gap, we see in this borough, this action seems to be seeking to widen it for groups such as Little Pegs. I would urge the council to reconsider their approach to the community centres, funding and management such that long-term support for groups such as Little Pegs is guaranteed. And then finally, Chair, Mr Baxter makes a comment on page 142 under the Libraries and Information Centres section. Stockingford Library on St Paul's Road appears to be missed off the list of libraries, which is in Kingswood Ward. That's the end of Mr Baxter's statement, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Is it you can come back on it in debate. As they're not here, you can't raise a point of clarification on a statement. Any non-councillor? Councillor Condacourt, sorry, non-cabinet member, Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you very much, Chair. There's too much to say on this, so I do hope the opposition groups will actually call this in so we can go through it, because there's an awful lot of stuff in here, and it may have actually benefited the infrastructure stuff going to the planning and whatever scrutiny committee. On the actual details, I'm passionate about getting better rail services. I think it's one way to get people in and out the borough very effectively for jobs in Coventry, Birmingham, Leicester, and hopefully Hinckley if it gets improved service. And we just hardly mention it. In the main report, there's mention of Knuckle, but nothing about the new entrance on Weddington side of the main railway station. In the detailed page 109, there's nothing about Stockingford station, and the Weddington entrance is uncosted. Further on the report, on the borough plan, there's another bit of report which says about Stockingford station. But really, it's all very bitty, and we should, in our borough plan and the monitoring reports, have a clear vision for a greener, more sustainable, more prosperous borough, in which case we have some investment in rail, because that will actually help us lift us up, get that prosperity from Coventry, Leamington, into the borough, so it's actually easy for people to travel from Stockingford to Hinckley or Stockingford. And one thing I'm really concerned about is in these plans is the dive under at the Nuneaton station, so the Leicester to Coventry trains can bypass the Nuneaton, is in our infrastructure plans. Why would we have a plan to actually downgrade the Nuneaton station and bypass it in our infrastructure plan? Because that is actually a negative. Yeah, it is totally crazy that Coventry to Leicester Express trains will not stop at the Nuneaton. and will get pushed onto a stopping service, stopping at every little wayside hut, by the way. Also, climate change. There is a tiny bit on page 127 at the top on climate change. 1/4 of a page in all this document on the Borough Plan. Climate change is going to be more and more and more significant. It's not just that river levels rise. There's a whole host of things about the heat, the need for shade, energy. Yeah, really, I'm aghast at how little mention climate change gets in all these reports. And then Mr. Baxter quite rightly points out the infrastructure problems we've got on things like sewage. 1,000 hours the pumping station in Weddington has been pumping out sewage into the River Anchor in 2020. We've lost our water voles just downstream of that. That is something we knew about as a council 10 years ago. All in the reports, the water cycle reports for the Borough Plan, it all mentioned we need to upgrade this pumping station. And at best case, it will get done in 3 years' time and still will only reduce those outflows by 20% once all... Yeah, we're not doing anywhere near enough to actually get a green and sustainable borough and have the scale of infrastructure to match the scale of housing we're building. It is totally nuts to have small upgrades 5 or 10 years late. It is a travesty. So I do hope we actually have a good look at this infrastructure, get the railways in, and actually start to do something about our things like sewage pumping, mental health. There's so much that we haven't got to cope with all the extra pressures on our borough. And this is all too little, too late, and an awful lot of it is uncosted. How can we not have costed the new station entrance yet? If you look at your infrastructure plan, some of the really key things we need to ask developers for when they put a planning application in is to be determined. We can't ask on this for section 106 monies for to be determined. The borough plan is now 10 years old. It was a 2011 to 2031 plan. It is 10 years late, or 9 years late when it got adopted, and we still don't know the costs of some of our infrastructure. So, I mean, I could talk for hours on this, which I won't. I'll finish here. But please have another look at this and correct some of these serious problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just simply going to ask Cabinet to consider this going to scrutiny and setting up a working group to look at some of the things in this and perhaps getting in touch with some of the consultees that don't seem to have replied fully to some of this. I think a working group would be a way forward to tackle some of these issues. So that's what I'm asking Cabinet for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Watkins. Any officer wish to come back?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a few points that I'd like to just clarify for members of Cabinet. So in terms of the documents, the technical documents, so when we talk about visioning, that's not really the place for visioning. So effectively, these documents are subservient to the Borough Plan. So what you need to do as an authority when you're preparing a local plan, we call it a Borough Plan, is effectively produce these documents, specifically the infrastructure delivery plan, and demonstrate to the inspector that that plan is deliverable. Now, in some occasions, it is acceptable for the inspector to be satisfied that some schemes are uncosted, and ultimately that will be driven by the stakeholders that are dealing with a scheme. So, you know, that could be Network Rail, National Highways, and ultimately our job as an authority is to satisfy to the inspector's satisfaction that that plan can be delivered. Now, the plan was adopted in 2019. We as an authority update our infrastructure delivery plan every year, so that gives us the opportunity to add to it and, you know, identify costings. Not every authority does that. But in terms of what we do with these documents, really, I would suggest to members of Cabinet that the main opportunity is part of your review process, because ultimately that's really the infrastructure delivery plan that you want to be focusing on in terms of putting significant effort into. The infrastructure delivery plan attached to this is simply an update to the existing adopted plan. ultimately it's up to the council if they want us to spend significant time reviewing this. We do, as officers, rely on the stakeholders in producing that information. I think that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Any Cabinet member? Okay, there are a few points that I wanted to raise. So in terms of Section 106 money, we do have to wait for some of it because it is phasing, so there might be an accumulation of money which sees a build-up of money in certain circumstances. But as with a lot of things, there are phases to planning applications, as Mrs. Condacall well knows, and that we have to wait for certain trigger points to be hit before we get the money in. But until we have all the money in, it is not economically viable to actually go ahead with the build until that money is in. So it may be a new play area, for example, that we want to deliver as part of the overall development, and they've paid money at 200 houses, 300 houses and 400 houses, but actually it probably makes more sense to wait until we've had the money in from all the trigger points, and then we do it all in one go so that we actually get more money, more bang for our buck. There are also ongoing discussions, I know, particularly with health services, where they are trying to decide, for example, in the Weddington area and Weddington St Nick's, about whether to use the land earmarked as part of the Church Fields development or whether they will use the top farm. And that is a conversation that both myself and Councillor Gutteridge had a few months back now with the teams at the George Eliot on that front. But in terms of setting up a committee, as we've already been told by our head of planning, that actually the biggest area of influence we can have is on the new borough plan review, and that I think is where Cabinet would much rather focus on delivering, which is the borough plan review. Yes, we have to have this for the existing borough plan, but again, this infrastructure delivery plan was put in place by the previous administration, which Councillor Watkins was a Cabinet member of. And we already have a committee to do that. It's called the Borough Plan Working Party, the Local Plan Committee, sorry, and that is where the work can be done. And work is being done. But to my knowledge, and I'm sure Councillor Smith can correct me if I'm wrong because he chaired it, there were no Labour members present at that committee. So I'm not going to set up another committee when existing councillors already fail to turn up. The work can be done at the Local Plan Committee. If you want to get stuck in, turn up and attend and work at the Local Plan Committee, because that's where we are focusing our energies on. I'm sorry, Councillor Condacall, you've had your say, so I'm not going to bring you back in. But there is a lot of work to be done on the infrastructure delivery plan, and I agree that the current one we have isn't perfect. There are a number of gaps in there that I'm sure a number of councillors have issues with. I do in my ward, and Councillor Gutteridge and I have had many frustrations about the infrastructure delivery plan in our neck of the woods, for example. I'm sure other councillors around the chamber do as well. But we have to live with what we've got, but what we can do is improve through the borough plan review process. And that is where this administration is going to focus its efforts on, because otherwise we aren't actually focusing on what can be delivered at all. Any other Cabinet member wish to speak? No? Okay, can we move to the vote then? All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Okay, that has been carried. Thank you. So we move on to the General Revenue Budget 22-23, the first round of savings. Councillor Croft even.
Thank you, Leader. That would have been a plot twist. This is a very significant report that lays bare for the public the financial situation of this council in terms of our general fund, and provides detail of the spend pressures and the problems that we face. But it also sets out the actions we are taking to close our deficit through savings and through income opportunities, and marks the beginnings of the transformation project of our council. And I'm afraid I must disappoint members on a cold evening that because it's so significant, I do intend to speak at some length on it. Now, the most important figure in the report in front of you is that we are currently projecting a £1.5 million deficit that must be closed in the general fund for FY 22-23. Now, this is in large part due to unavoidable growth in budgets. For example, the increase in our population due to the development requires an extra bin round for refuse and recycling. There's inflation affecting utilities, material costs, labour shortage, increasing wages, etc., etc. There are also, of course, pressures from the pandemic, including increased homelessness costs and the national economic picture affecting our ability to rent commercial property. We have, as a cabinet, also identified 2 areas of further spend pressure as part of our corporate governance reform agenda. As we'll be discussing tonight, the communications team requires restructuring to beef it up and place it in a better position to promote our borough. This is not some exercise in council propaganda, as some more juvenile minds would have you believe. Rather, it is absolutely necessary to promote our towns. We cannot achieve economic regeneration and civic revival without attracting visitors and businesses to invest in our town. And to do that, we need a much greater capacity to promote Nuneaton and Bedworth as the place to live and to work and to visit. The second area where we've identified growth is the Democratic Services team, because quite simply, the team needs more resource. Unlike the previous administration that seemed to take a do-nothing approach, we have come into office with a very big agenda for change, which requires more committees, more meetings, and more work. In fact, we've had committees proposed this evening, and we need more resource in the team to support that. As I said at council last week, we don't mind doing more work for less money, because we believe that the reward for public life is public progress, but we can't expect the same for our staff doing paid work. And this report also notes, in very happy news, that there is £52.6 million that we've been awarded by the Conservative government for our regeneration projects. But of course, because these are grant monies, these are earmarked for very specific capital projects. The Luff money for the magnificent new Bedworth Leisure Centre, and Councillor Evans isn't here this evening, but I'll congratulate him again, the Future High Streets Fund and the Towns Fund, but they don't affect our base general fund position. So let me return to that deficit of £1.5 million out of an approximately £17 million budget. Now, thanks to prudent management and our emergency budget in June, this is actually a lower deficit than was forecast in the last Labour budget that was presented in February. A gap which, like the £500,000 black hole in the Bedworth Leisure Centre project, they did nothing to close before the election. In fact, a consistent theme since we took office in May is our discovery that this council has had poor strategic political leadership, leading to poor corporate governance for a considerable period under the Labour Party. And one of the contributing factors to our situation is that there has been little strategic thinking in terms of the council's financial situation. The council is required to balance the budget by law. But rather than taking strategic, medium and long-term decisions, and that sort of approach to budgeting, the previous administration simply balanced the books each year without a coherent long-term plan. That means that spending was salami-sliced across services, pay and benefits became uncompetitive, the quality of services declined, and the structure of the council became haphazard and illogical. And the budget situation remained fundamentally unsustainable. In short, the council has been paying too little to do too much, when in fact it should be spending the proper resources to focus on the key frontline services and delivering them to a higher standard. And this report is the beginning of a new approach under the Conservative leadership. We are going to begin serious, medium-term financial planning over 3 years, and as you can see from point 6 in the report, we are not just making savings for this year's budget, we are making them for years into the future. Now that is all to the good, Leader. But let me be clear, the situation now facing the council is very grave. We are legally required to set a balanced, sustainable budget, and a council that can't, I've said this before, a council that can't set a balanced budget is quite frankly a little better than a banana republic. If we can't meet the challenge, all of our efforts at revival and regeneration will fail. We can meet that challenge, but urgent action is required immediately. The local authority finance settlement has not yet been announced, but the council cannot just depend on handouts from the government. We have to get our own house in order. And it is never popular, I'm afraid to say, to make savings. But no council worth its salt would shy away from hard choices, which it knows to be right, simply because of unpopularity. We can only lay our case in front of people, frankly, explain our reasons, and trust them to judge us. Now, this report is the result of a rigorous process by our officers and members of internal challenge to examine what the council does and where the savings can be made. The results amount to £1.1 million of savings and income opportunities for budget 2022, but in line with our new long-term plan, the approach we've taken will provide cumulative savings of £3.4 million over 3 years. The largest proportion of the savings identified comes from in my own portfolio of finance and corporate affairs, and that's only right and proper because at the election in May, we did commit to examine back office function before we affected frontline services. We've examined where there is duplication across council functions and where rationalisation and centralisation would provide a better service at less cost to the taxpayer. For example, by moving to a more bespoke customer service arrangement and increasing the scope for shared services across several teams. We have reassessed the way in which the General Fund charges the HRA, which is the more sustainable arm of the council finances, and proposed a charging settlement which is fairer, better reflects the work done, and assists our budget position. We have also been able to factor in on that some below-the-line financial savings with increases in investment income and loan interest. We will, however, also be making economies, deleting some vacant posts, disposing of unnecessary council resources like the sports development vehicle, which we have for some reason still, and we are reassessing our charging system, starting with caravan sites so that we are more competitive at market levels, so the taxpayer gets a fair return on their investment, because that is effectively what the council does. There are also those areas where we believe the council quite simply has overstretched and performs functions which can be better left to the private sector. There are numerous, for example, private pest control contractors, so we believe there is little point in the council spending public money to offer a duplicate service which can be bought on the free market. In addition to savings, our work has also identified some income opportunities. At the last Cabinet, we approved our enterprise strategy to encourage a more commercial and enterprising and corporate-minded, in the best sense of the phrase, approach at this council. So the proposal we're bringing forward to rent out office space in the town hall, which is, after all, very underused at the moment in the age of home working, is very welcome. Also using NABCEL to perform cleaning services, and as we extend these policies of commercialisation in the years to come, they'll open up new income opportunities for us, so our longer-term budget position will be much healthier. I'd like to stress again, Leader, that the savings we announce tonight do not solve all of our problems. We are still £400,000 away from balancing the books, and if we want to include any extra expenditure, we will have to go further. But this report marks the first step in a broad programme of transformation that we are initiating at this council. If we are going to succeed, our motto is going to have to be reform with no sacred cows, because without reform, there can be no recovery and no regeneration. There is not much point in having the government give us money for transformation and regeneration if we cannot balance the books and if the council machinery does not work properly to carry out our plans. The machine has to work. It needs reform to make it work. This report and this budget, in tandem with our new corporate plan, the Building a Better Borough document, are going to begin that process of reform. So we are making these changes out of necessity. We do have to deal with a serious financial situation, but we are also going to use these changes to create a better council through better ways of working, which will lead to a better borough and a brighter future for our people. And before I sit down, I would just like to publicly express my thanks to the officers for all the work they've done, particularly our finance team, with some very tough staffing issues in the past couple of weeks, and particularly Director Fitzgerald and Head of Financial Services, Craig Pugh. So I shall move the report, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Golby, thank you. I have one public speaker on this item, which is Mrs. Condacle.
Well, I've read through the thing, and there's some bits which I absolutely agree with, and things like the printing and what have you can obviously a lot can be saved. Now that we're in the time when everyone's got tablets and laptops and all that sort of thing, but there are some bits, and I can't help but sort of say, really? I mean, how realistic is it to hire out office space in the town hall? Previous item and things were saying, you know, how difficult it is to get commercial properties let and all this sort of thing. So I just find this, you know, quite tricky to sort of get. Internal audit, shared service review. You know, at the moment, we've only got a really small team of internal auditors. The audit committee asked them to do all sorts of audits at the first meeting, which I attended. Can't remember when that was it September? I've lost track. Things. I understand that one of these staff members is on long-term sick. So how are they going to be able to, you know, do more and, you know, get 20,000 and things? On the housing and communities bit, I'm glad you clarified what GF stands for. I have said it how many times, and I'll have to say it again. Please don't use all these acronyms without saying what they are, because I did not know what that meant. The sort of increase in the caravan sites and what have you. I mean, the whole point of council having properties, be it mobile homes, be it houses and things, is for those people who can't afford to live, you know, or can't afford to pay for the market rates and things. So bringing it up to market rates, is that not just going to increase the homelessness side of things? I don't know. I don't suppose Bedworth are going to be terribly pleased that they're sort of losing their customer service centre, but I think pest control, again, people just won't pay because if there isn't the, you know, council option, I don't think people are going to avoid paying, because commercial people will just increase their rates. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Condacourt. We also have a statement to be read out by Brent Davis by Jessica Tomlinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We at Little Pegs have called Stockingford Community Centre our home for many years now. Room hire is affordable and the facilities meet our group's needs perfectly. For years we have been supporting families living with autism, but one of our biggest roles has turned out to be supporting those children that are stuck in limbo on the 4-year waiting list for an autism assessment. For many of those families, we are their only support. In October's scrutiny meeting, several councillors expressed their disgust at the waiting times and promised to do all they can to help those waiting times for assessment. Doing anything that puts the future of this centre at risk goes directly against those promises. So I'd like to ask you today to start by not removing the funding for Stockingford Community Centre. We get no help to do what we do at Little Pegs, and yet we have families joining us that tell us that Rise tell them to join, or Rise told them about us. The removal of funding does nothing except create an uncertain future for the centre. This makes our job so much harder. There is nowhere that can meet our group's needs quite like Stockingford Community Centre. Having spoken with several councillors about this, they tell me that it wasn't mentioned on the doorstep when canvassing the Barpool ward, but I wonder how many of those spoken to knew anything about this, or what the Tory plans for the centre moving forwards. Were they aware as soon as the Tory candidate took the seat, funding for the centre would be removed? The centre has a wide reach and is a safe haven for all that use it, not just from the Barpool ward, but across the entire borough. And finally, I'd like to ask where all these volunteers are going to come from. There have been a lot of cuts over the years made by the Conservatives at County, where volunteers are expected to fill the gap. Children's centres, libraries, etc. All cut with the onus being put onto the public to fill the gaps that's been left. Those of us that run groups at the centre are already volunteers. There simply aren't enough hours in the day for us to keep filling these gaps. Thank you, Chair. That's the end of this statement.
Thank you, Brent. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier you talked about evidence-based, and it would be really nice, because you said, well, car parking's up a bit, if we had a bit more detail in these reports to see what the current financial situation is. This report was put out last thing on Friday, not a week before the meeting, and is not subject to calling, therefore it's a very short timescale. And it we also have issues like the borough plan. We keep talking about the parking and that. Clearly, if the car parking costs £500,000 and accelerating the borough plan costs 100,000 or whatever, if we've got data, we can work out how things change. But we're in a limbo. When you choose to, you say, actually, we need all this £500,000 for parking. And then when you don't choose to, you say, well, we're actually getting more income from parking. This is lacking the data. On the mobile homes, I agree totally with my wife. This is robbing the poorest sections of our borough to pay effectively for 3 hours parking for £1. Now, I agree we need that cheap parking to actually stimulate the economy, but 2 hours for £1? Yeah, it's balancing things, and this is where all the things you're doing is increasing charges on those less able to pay to actually give a benefit to those who've got the most wealth. We understand that things need to change and we need to be more logical and more science-based or economic-based on parking charges, etc. And that may cost us some money. But the direction of travel is to tax those at least well off, increase charges on those at least well off, 15% hike in the charges for these mobile home sites. They were not told to come to this meeting. Is this going to get implemented straight away, or is there going to be consultation? £190 extra a year for these people is a serious amount of money so that other people can have a bit more time on their parking. I really think some of the things, particularly the mobile home charges, are so regressive it should have a proper impact assessment and proper consultation. And we also talk about Stockingford and obviously there's Kersley community centres. These are really, really important venues. And clearly there are ways to technically make them look less expensive. They currently pay an awful lot of things like business rates and things. So restructuring how they're organised in a way could actually make a business rate saving, for example. But to actually say we're going to take 30,000 out of them without really any detail, I mean, people are afraid, and they might be wrongly afraid, because your changes may be purely technical or they may be structural in how they run. But we really need detail. So I really want the mobile homes and the community centres to go through a proper scrutiny process before the February budget and before any action is taken. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condicle. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I won't allow myself to going into the calling of people or groups or anything. And it's nice to see that my plea to you as the leader of the council fell on deaf ears when I said that we should treat each other with a bit more respect within this chamber. I should carry on treating everybody with respect whilst I'm at this town hall. The black hole that you keep on going on about, it couldn't have been. So in the same sentence, you say that we had a black hole, and then you also say that it was legally signed off. It's one or the other. It could either be legally signed off or there's a black hole. It was legally signed off, so there wasn't a black hole. It's quite simple, that is. So I don't really need to go into that over and over and over again at every single meeting, because it's getting a little bit boring now. There's a few things in here that I'm a bit concerned about. The transferring of more things to NABCEL. I have brought this up a few times. I'm concerned about more and more things from the council going over to NABCEL. The increased self-contained temporary accommodation with the HRA reducing the next subsidy loss. I'd like more information on that as well, please. The increased fees for caravan sites, I'm really concerned about that. And I'd like to consider reducing that. I'm not saying that they can't have any increase, but it seems a bit harsh to me to go up so much. And then finally, the transfer of the community centres from council management to community-run committees. This is something that I've had a lot of people getting on to me about. They're really concerned about this. Again, it's hitting the hardest people, the people that are most affected within our communities, within Stockingford and Kersley. And so I'd like to think that this could go to a scrutiny committee before it's implemented, and if not before it's implemented, and then shortly after, within 6 months of it being implemented, to see what effects it's had on the communities in which these community centres are. So I am concerned about a lot of things in here, but there's my pleas for you really, is to look at taking these to scrutinies, and there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Before I bring officers in, I would just like to say I have treated every councillor in this room and member of the public with nothing but respect tonight. You might not like statement of the facts, but that is not necessarily not treating you with respect. So please bear that in mind when you're making accusations about not treating people respectfully. In fact, I am treating you as Leader of the Opposition more respectfully than than the former Labour leaders ever treated me. Your time is over, Councillor Watkins. Your time is over, Councillor Watkins. So is there anything officers wish to come back on that? No. Councillor Golby.
The HRA caravans have been brought up a couple of times, so I'll clarify that. It does actually say that it's market. We're going up to market rate. We've also spent a lot of money on the caravan sites in the last few months to update them and to invest in the caravan sites. So to say it's hitting them hardest, actually we've put money into improving the caravan sites. It is only fair that people pay a market rate, and it quite clearly states that we have looked at the evidence and we are going towards market rate. So I'm not sure how you can accuse us of basically being Robin Hood for car parking charges, because you know as well as everybody else that actually it's an entirely different budget. The HRA is the HRA. It's not car parking. We've never paid car parking out of it. You know that. You're just sensationalising the point. As far as the use of space by third parties, well, you might have missed it, but last week I attended the opening of the Citizens Advice Bureau, literally downstairs. They have moved in. It's joint working. It was a great idea, and I'm happy to welcome them. And on that note, I can tell you that we're having conversations with quite a few other third parties that are interested in moving in as well. So this little kind of siloed mentality doesn't work. We have available space. People want available space. We are in a prime town centre position, and we also work with lots of third parties that would be. There would be better working practices if they were down the hall from the council staff who they engage with on a multiple times a day. So actually, it is quite a good working arrangement, and that's one of the reasons why the CAB moved in. They can go straight over to our customer services. They can advocate for clients that come in to our customer services people. We've got the housing team who deal with a lot of referrals from Brandcab. It works really well, and actually it provides a quicker and more responsive service to the client, who usually, when they are presenting to the CAB, are in crisis. So actually it helps people in crisis resolve their crises quicker. So there is a bit of strategic thinking which clearly is lost on that front. Well, you can't.
You can't, Mrs. Condacor. You're not a councillor,
You can't
so you
respond.
can't respond.
I'm sure there'll be some sort of Twitter post later. Let's move on. So, yeah, I mean, I think I'll just leave it there. But you're living in cloud cuckoo land if you don't think we need to move on. You really are.
Mrs. Condacor. No, thank you. She was responding to a point that you raised. You asked a question, you got an answer. Mrs. Condacor, you might not like the answer. You asked a question, you've had it. Right. So, just moving on, there are a few points that I would like to address before I bring Councillor Croft in. Are these achievable? in the professional opinion of the Section 151 officer, they have been signed off as achievable. Otherwise, they would not be within this report. In fact, savings have been consistently revised before we brought them to Cabinet to ensure that they were robust and that they would stand up to scrutiny, and that, in the professional opinion of Mr Fitzgerald, that he could actually legitimately sign them off. And we have had interest, as Councillor Golby has said, from other sections, from other third parties about using town hall space. That is actually what prompted a number of the conversations that we have had, is that we have been approached by people and companies and organisations about that. And indeed, it is something which was highlighted in the LGA peer review, that we can actually utilise our estate a lot better than we currently do. In terms of caravans, actually, they were raised under the last Labour administration's budget. They were in there in the budget then, so they can't actually, as I understand it, actually be increased yet, but we're signalling our intent to do so now, so they will have fair warning about that. But what I would say is to councillors, you find me anywhere else you can rent a home for £31 a week. There are many people who are struggling to get on the housing ladder and can't do that. Indeed, social rent is in the region of about £75 per week when you're looking at bricks and mortar social housing from the council. So I think £31 per week is reasonable. It is in line with other authority areas, which we have benchmarked against. So that is, again, utilising the data. In reference to the Bedworth area office, which has been raised, during the pandemic, we had to close the area office anyway because it wasn't viable. And what we did was, and Mr Shardlow has been looking at this quite robustly, is that residents have been able to book one-to-one, face-to-face meetings either at home or potentially at the library in Bedworth, which they have actually found more useful and actually directs our resources to where they are most needed, rather than having someone sat in an office over there all day, every day, when they might not actually see a single solitary person come in. That is far better use of our resources and directs it to those who are most in need. So I'm quite confident that we can maintain that level of standard of customer service. And as someone who works in customer service and who values customer service, I would not be proposing anything that would actually see a diminution of our customer service that we provide. So I think that is perfectly reasonable. And they also, if they are absolutely urgent, they can, of course, come over to the town hall, which is open between 10 and 2. And it's not that far to come. In fact, there are other authorities where they would have to travel literally tens of miles to get to their town hall. We are one of the most compact districts available to do that. Councillor Condacall raised about car park ticketing sales and reports and evidence. I would suggest that he reads the regeneration planning and business OSP papers for tomorrow, because it's on the quarterly performance report about the ticket sales, and I'm happy to report that it is a smiley face when I read the report the other night. So if he wishes to read the report, then he is more than welcome to do so, because it actually highlights that things are on the up in that respect. But I'm going to come back to this issue about Stockingford Community Centre, because it has been said that people are afraid. What I would say is this: there is no reason to be afraid, because we are taking these community centres from the shackles of the council and putting them directly into your hands. The only reason, in my experience, people get afraid is because of leaflets like were posted through door letterboxes in the Barpool by-election, trying to deliberately frighten people about the loss of a service, or by people trying to use the politics of fear to bring forward their own support. We have never played the politics of fear on the Conservative benches, in opposition or in control, and we will not lower ourselves to do so. And I find it, I accept that the statement that we had from Miss Tomlinson expressed some concerns. I think in the interest of full disclosure, it is only fair to say that she is actually indeed a Labour activist, since she raised about Tory cuts this and Tory cuts that and Tory council. She is a Labour activist. What I would say to her is, there is already an active committee at Stockingford Community Centre. In fact, I think they have the capability and tenacity to actually run that community centre as well, if not better than the council. because they can actually go out there and seek sources of grant funding from other organisations where the doors are simply closed to us as a council. And it would actually enable them to do far more and be more responsive to their community's needs by actually putting them in direct control. And I think that is far safer and far better. And if you look at it, there are only actually across the whole borough 3 community centres that are run by this council. There's Kersley, there is Stockingford and Newtown Road, although Newtown Road, to be fair, is mainly utilised by other services such as the NHS Blood Department, Carver, etc. If you look at our budget for community centres, it is just over £220,000. If you look at our budget for the leisure centres, that's £250,000. But our leisure centres get far more use per person than the community centres. We have to direct our resources to where there is greater need and where there is greater usage. And I think this strikes the right balance. We could have just shut them and made an instant £220,000 saving, but that isn't what we have done. What we have done is put forward a measured plan to manage the move over from council control into a phased situation where the community groups can take over themselves, and we have actually invested money in terms of ensuring that the buildings will have access to capital funding in the handover process so that any works which need doing can be done. But tell the volunteers at Bulkington Community Centre that they aren't up to the job. I'm sure you would soon get a very stern reply. Tell the volunteers at Whitestone Community Centre they're not up to the job. Again, you would get a stern reply. Are you saying the people in Stockingford and Kersley are not as capable as the people in Bulkington and Whitestone? No, they are not. They are perfectly capable of running these centres. They are intelligent, articulate, well-meaning people, just as the people of Bulkington and Whitestone are, and indeed other community centres across our borough. I believe, Councillor Golby, you have one right in the heart of your ward. And these people actually are invested in their communities, and that's what makes the difference. They are at the heart of the communities they serve, and they can make far more impact and difference than the council can. As well-meaning as we are as a council, at the end of the day, we are not of that community, and we have our own restrictions and purse strings too. And these people might actually come up with something which is far more innovative than what we are actually capable of giving as a council. I think it is actually an exciting time to get involved in the running of these community centres, and I would encourage anyone to come forward who wishes to do so, and come forward to the council and speak to us, and we will have a rational, reasoned debate and discussion with you, and we will work through this to help you take these over. We are not shy of getting our hands stuck in, and neither are the officers, and I know that Mr Shardlow has a lot of experience in these areas and would welcome the chance and opportunity to speak to these people to actually point them in the right direction. So let's not have the politics of fear over this. Let's have the politics of we can do this, because I think the residents of this borough can meet the challenge and actually make a saving for the council too. I think this can be win-win. So that's my little rant over, so to speak. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. You've covered an awful lot of what I wanted to say. I will just reiterate to Councillor Conticourt is that this proposal, this report before us tonight, does not actually cover our car parking offer. That was changed within the in-year budget back in June, and this is to get a balanced position in the budget for next year. So any saving you see before you tonight is nothing to do with car parking. It hasn't yet been factored into the equation, any revised car parking offer. So it's, as I said at Council last week, we do have to be careful not to be misleading in our statements. Councillor Watkins, I will just say as an aside, and I hope he understands I mean this quite sincerely, is that no personal attack was made on Councillor Watkins. All's fair in politics, and I like to think that we make legitimate criticisms of the Labour Party, but in terms of the man, Chris Watkins, I don't think you'll find a personal attack on him in this chamber, so I hope he takes that in the spirit it is intended. In response to the query he made about the self-contained contemporary accommodation. That is in Town Hall speak in the report, so I will just clarify that for him. What that means is restructuring the service so that we can actually provide more accommodation for rough sleepers ourselves in-house. It's what we've talked about for years, so we don't have to send so much money to the Holiday Inn or to bed and breakfast. So I hope that clarifies what it is. Councillor Wilson, leader, you have expressed most of what I was going to say on the community centres, but I will just try to reassure the members of the public that this is not a scheme for closure. It is a scheme for transfer of the community centres. That is what we have envisaged. What is going to happen, and this is what this report before us tonight gives the officers the authority to do, is council officers will work with the community centres and the committees to support them to produce a sustainable business plan within 6 months of this meeting tonight. And once that plan is in place, we will transfer control of the community centres. Now, once that system is established, we will then transfer the building and the asset in the next financial year. So it is a very long phased transfer. We are not just pulling out, we are not just cutting and running. And as Councillor will, as you say, Leader, we have actually made a provision for £83,000 of capital works to repair the buildings. So the centres under new control will be much more sustainable because they will be left with buildings that are fit for the future. One of our old mottos is trust the people, and we really do think that communities know better how to run their own affairs than any council. So that is what this is about, and the new independence that they're going to get will give them more scope to apply for grants from the county, from other organisations, and I know that our splendid Stockingford County councillors are already thinking about how to support them in doing this. So it's, as you say, Leader, the politics of fear are completely inaccurate, it's misleading, it's a very positive programme to empower our communities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft. Unless there's any other speaker on this item, shall we move to the vote? So, all those in favour of the report, please show. Okay, thank you very much. That is passed. But there is still, as Councillor Croft said, a long way to go before we have balanced the books. That moves us on to agenda item number 12, which is the communications and marketing strategy. Councillor Croft.
That is me. Again, I should be very brief, Leader, because I've already alluded to it. This was something that we've picked up from internal feedback and from the LGA peer review. It is really about moving the comms team from acting as a sort of press and publicity function for the council into proper promotion of the borough and towns, which is absolutely essential if we are going to have regeneration and investment and increased visitors. It's all there in the strategy, and I won't speak for too long, I'll just move the report. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft, and I will second that from the Chair. I have one public speaker, which is Mrs. Condacor.
Thank you. I mean, communication is vitally important things, but can we please start at the beginning and actually get the basics right? Up until this point, I can safely say that the communications team here has been the hardest team from any department in the borough to actually get communication from, which is absolutely ironic. I say that as chair of the Cycle Forum, just trying to get things updated and the like. It's been a battle every time. And also just in the last couple of days, there's been a press release, or whatever you like to call it, and it's on your website, about the Christmas bins and what have you. The thing about Christmas bins, I clicked on the link, it comes up with page error not found. It's because it says Christmas bins and you have to have it Christmas space bins. But even when I click onto that, it doesn't tell me what I expected it to say. It has a link to when you can find when your bin's going to be collected. Okay, fair enough and things. I would expect on that page to have a lovely list saying Christmas cards, you can do this, you know, glitter, you can't, and what have you, and things. And all it is links to what you can put in your green bin or whatever, and you have to click on yet another link and things. So you're not getting the basics right, or the comms team or whoever does it is not getting the basics right. So yes, we need to promote the borough. I have no problem with that aspect of it and things, but we need to make sure the team are actually getting the basics right before you start doing anything fancy.
Thank you, Mrs Condacor. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Watkins and Councillor Condacor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm actually in support of this, that our communications team is out there selling this borough. Now is possibly the best time ever to start selling the borough, showing everybody what we have here, getting people to visit, and hopefully settling here, building their businesses here. So I'm in support of this, that we get out there, start selling this borough for all the good things that are here, for people to come visit and hopefully stay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Condacor.
When I was first councillor, we had the wonderful Ananotti here, who was a great ambassador for the town centres, both of them, did loads of radio appearances and really brought in lots of footfall. So I totally understand we need to actually really start to promote the town and have that passion for our towns back again. A couple of points I would like to make is there's a slight overlap between the various regeneration projects, which are almost freestanding and run by Queensberry's and this contractors and that contractors. There's all sorts of stuff with the town centre stuff, which has a lot of money. We're talking about 50 million, I think somewhere else you're saying, which could have a comms function. We've got our own internal comms, and then we've got things like the new MRF and the county or sub-regional recycling stuff. So there's lots of comms going on, and I'm a bit concerned that we actually end up paying for it all from our general fund, GF. So it is really useful to actually work out how we fund this better communication from the various pots, and particularly I keep saying about the MRFs and the stuff we're doing to make a greener recycling. That needs to feed into the same comms effort. So I agree we need to improve and increase the size of our comms, but we do need to actually work out how we actually get it funded so it's not a big hit on our general fund. And finally, a lot of towns have bids which do a lot of this good communication. Do we know what's happening with our bid application from the Nuneaton? Has that died, or will we sort of roll that into what we're doing in some way? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacor. Anything officers wish to pick up on? No? Well, I'm pleased to hear that Councillor Condacor is looking on this report more favourably, because I saw in a social media post that he said it was looking likely that the council was going to be spending more money on propaganda. So I would hope that Councillor Condacor would actually withdraw those remarks, because this isn't about putting propaganda out from the council. This is about informing residents about what this council actually does. And he has been one of the biggest champions, actually, and I would agree with him to an extent, that we haven't actually informed residents enough about what we are doing. And yet then we get blasted on social media for actually trying to put measures in place will actually do the very thing he has spent years calling for, and something which I, to a large part, agree with him with. The LGA corporate peer review said that we need to get better at our comms strategy and our marketing, because if we are to actually, as Councillor Croft said, to get people interested in transforming the Nuneaton, we've got the public money to do a large chunk, but that will not get us anywhere near over the line in terms of fully regenerating the Nuneaton or Bedworth. We need to get the private sector on board. And how are they going to find out? They're going to find out because we're putting stuff out there and communicating with people about these things. Just as an example about how the power of communication gets out there, a few weeks ago, I actually had an email from a Christopher Wilson, because spelled exactly the same as me, a lawyer, a Labour lawyer, I think it was in Chicago, that he was, and because he has a setup that pings every time a news story goes out with Christopher Wilson, He said, oh, who is this Christopher Wilson who seems to be issuing press releases in my name? And then he found me. He said, oh, hello, I'm Christopher Wilson, you're Christopher Wilson. And that is how we get messages out there about actually being involved and doing things as a communications team. By the way, I did reply and say, hello, nice to meet you, so to speak. But there are so many things that we do need to communicate about and shout about. So we're doing, for example, these video clips, which I've done, Councillor Gutteridge has done, and Councillor Golby has done. And the stats that I'm getting back from officers, and Brent has also told me this, is that whereas normally we'd probably get 100 or 200 views or likes, we're getting 7,000 to 10,000 or even more people looking at it. And it's just by doing something differently that we're actually communicating to more people. But what it is going to be vital to do as part of transforming Nuneaton is that the comms element is going to be coming back in-house for a large part of transforming Nuneaton. In fact, that was raised at the town's investment board last Friday, which Councillor Condacor was there for the public session about. And I informed him at full council last week he could attend. And that's because as part of the transformation agenda, we cannot afford to keep paying these consultants a large amount of money for these things. We have retained a small budget for that, for where it goes beyond our expertise, but we will need to do an element of that in-house, and that means having resource to do it, and that's what this goes some way towards doing. So I think that this communications and marketing strategy is a step in the right direction and means that we can actually get the good works out there that we're doing and actually highlight that Nuneaton and Bedworth is open for business and come and do deals with us because we are interested. So I'm more than happy to have seconded it from the chair. Does any councillor have anything they wish to come back on? No? Okay. Can we then have a show of hands of those all in favour, please? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. So that moves us on to agenda item number 13, which is recommendations from overview and scrutiny panels. There are none that I've been made aware of. We then move on to any other items. There is an AOB, but it will be taken under the confidential session, which I agreed to yesterday and the chair of the relevant OSP has signed off on. So that leads me on to the exclusion of public and press under agenda item 15. So I'm happy to move that from the chair. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Croft. Just so that we're all above board, can we have a show of hands all in favour, please? Thank you. Mrs. Condacor has left. Can you just make sure that the live stream is ended, please, Kelly? Is it worth shutting the doors as well? Thank you. You never know who's in the building, Councillor Condacor.